There it is. Okay. Hi, everybody. Sorry, I couldn't
Oh
find the
Lord, look
proper
at me.
thing.
Oof.
Yeah, big oof. No, we are talking D&D today on Tabletop Thursdays, and this is going to be kind of a world-building episode, and that's why I brought in one of my favorite world builders, storytellers. It's my... Oh, he's gone now. He already cut his
Fuck.
feed.
Sorry, I had another call. I'm still here on audio.
Okay, he's here, but it's my brother. He's been to film school. He actually knows story structure and things like that. And it actually, I think,
Which may or may not help you, for the record.
Yes, yeah. Well, the interesting thing is he built a D&D world for a campaign that never got off the ground. But his world building was one of the most incredible I'd seen when I was diving into it, and he had like this whole wiki and everything. But his approach to D&D world building was far different from mine.
Sorry.
You're fine, dude.
I'm just gonna take this call real quick.
Okay. So while he's
I'll
taking
be
that,
right back. Sorry, everybody.
You're good. So I'll kind of explain the differences in the design philosophy as far as world building goes between me and my brother. My main thing about it is um, I build the world around the story. So, like for me, I had the story that I wanted to tell in mind. It was about the god of nightmares, and how it was trying to break down the walls between realms. And I don't want to go too much into spoiler details, but like that was the story that I wanted to tell. When it came to actual world building, I actually just took the story beats that I wanted and figured out in my brain where I thought the best place for those story beats to happen, and did my world building based on that. So I basically mapped out a story and then put a world over that story. Whereas my brother's approach is very different. He had all of these ideas of the places that he wanted to be, and so he actually built his entire world and then was just throwing the story at it to inflict it on to his world, which I think is a very interesting, very good idea as a DM, because the story doesn't always go the way that you want it to go. And so mine is really, really dependent on my PCs engaging in the story that I want them to engage in. Had they gone completely off the rails and wanted to do something else, my world building would have had to changed into a different design philosophy. And I
I'm
think we got
back.
him back. Okay, perfect.
Real quick. Sorry, just.
I got you, bud.
I'm trying to get in the room.
Yep. Hold on. There we go.
Hey, knock knock.
There we go.
All right. So yeah, it's interesting. Am I? All right. Yeah.
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah. So with D&D, this was the campaign that's happening that Ty's talking about. It was one of those. It was my first DMing, so I went way too far with the world building. I do want to caution against that. If we are talking about world building, I think it's really important to you're not going to get everything in there. And that's one thing I really learned. But what I wanted to do when I was world building was to create a world that had conflict in it. And then sort of through the conflict, I was going to try and let the characters decide which direction they wanted to go. And for this one, I was kind of inspired by a Cold War vibe where you have big powers crushing into each other. And I'm while I like D&D, and I like fantasy settings. I always like stuff that's tweaked just a little bit, or just has
just
those
a little
flavors,
bit on the head.
but is a little. Well, just give it something like a fresh coat of paint for your players and for myself.
There you go.
And for me, another big thing that helped shape this campaign was the Obsidian expansion, or not Obsidian, yeah,
Eberron.
Eberron, the Eberron expansion.
I actually have
the Eberron
your
expansion
Eberron book right here.
Yeah.
For those of you who don't know, Eberron, this was the campaign setting. It was, I think, introduced in 4th edition, actually.
No, it was 3.5. You're holding a
3.5
3.5
okay.
book right now. Yeah.
Oh, you're right.
That one's actually provided courtesy of Mr. Michael.
It was one of the first, and 3.5 is where Wizards of the Coast took over, as opposed where originally D&D was still under its own banner, which is where the big split happened between D&D and Pathfinder.
Wow, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
A little bit of history.
But yeah, so I looked at the Eberron campaign, and I saw a lot of stuff that it has these mech people, it has artificers. There's kind of this. There's more a technological sort of steampunky feel to a lot of stuff.
Tech fantasy,
which I thought, yeah, it's like a tech
without
fantasy
getting
thing.
Futuristic.
Yeah, and without actually going full steampunk, because I don't know. I'm just not super into steampunk as a setting either,
Steampunk
because
is too
it often.
Victorian to be interesting in a lot of things, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I don't mind Victorian, but there's something about the way steampunk does it that just doesn't work for me. So I really like
Yeah.
the Eberron campaign for having the high fantasy, elements with some of those steampunk elements.
You know what I like it about Eberron a lot is the fact that technology existed, but it was based on kind of magic and stuff that it made it had logical
Totally.
precursors. Whereas steampunk didn't work for me because everything stopped for no reason. Like everything
Right.
stuck
Well,
there for no
the great thing
reason.
about Eberron, yeah, no, I totally agree. And the great thing about Eberron is that like players were already doing this kind of stuff, right? They were
Yeah,
already figuring out like, okay, well, if I can make fire with one hand and like I can make a steam engine, right? Like I could figure out ways to like store
magically power
spells and
shit.
whatever. Yeah, so it kind of embraced that aspect of a part of something that was already part of D&D. Really liked that, and sort of with those inspirations in mind, I wanted to create somewhere like a big sandbox with things to do, and I also had an idea of how I wanted the story to progress based on the revealing of the world,
Whether or not it
right?
be in the background or while it's happening. No, just curious. Did you have a like a working timeline of when things would happen, or was it going to be based off of what the characters would do, or was it going to happen regardless of what characters did?
The way that I approach the world building is, so you have your base level world, which I sort of I took a lot of stuff from the base D&D world with like Waterdeep and stuff like that, or Forgotten Realms. Sorry, with Forgotten Realms, and then
Yes.
I sort of took that map and then I put four floating
You also
islands
used the Sword
above the
Coast a
world.
lot, didn't you?
Yeah, I just kind of grabbed whatever
Okay, I'm just
whatever
trying to remember. Sorry.
whatever I thought would work. Um, so what I did is I took this map and then I sort of split it up for my major players to give like that big world reveal feel, and then I set up these four floating islands, and the four floating islands were going to work like in video game terms a lot like the worlds in like Sonic.
Yeah,
Each of them had a storyline with
it was
them,
Sonic
but
inspired.
you could go to any of the islands in any order, but also just like a proper open world, if you went to one that was too tough, you were gonna get destroyed.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, if you didn't
and
stay
that
in
and it
line, right? Because
yeah,
were they civilized islands or like wild islands?
they're civilized floating magical apparatuses that were
So
maintained and very like intentional.
to go there, you'd
Um,
lose a lot of freedom, even if you did get in, and more likely the requirements to get
these
in, you probably wouldn't meet, right?
for each I thought it would be interesting if these are almost status symbols for these giant countries,
Oh,
like these are their maintained capital cities that define who they are,
so
right?
they oh man, would they kind of? Oh, sorry, I'm just so they would they kind
Hmm.
of like one of the things is to maintain power, to have an unsiegeable capital. Is why power has been so located to these four powers, and why it's gotten to the point of Cold War status of unbreakable.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, it was to me it was the clearest way to establish the difference in power levels between the four big players and the smaller players in the world. The
yeah.
difference between like
First
people
world and
who,
second, third world.
I mean, kind of, but like it was like nations versus states or cities and stuff.
Okay,
So yeah, other than that, I'm gonna start in on some of our races. If you
perfect.
guys like, I actually
Oh, before
when we were doing this campaign, I created an obsidian portal, which was a place where you could create like your own wiki for your worlds, and I've like linked in the chat
oh, I just
the
did the
Harbinger
same thing.
complex. All right, campaign, and
Now, what inspired
this
the
is where
name? Just curious. Harbinger Complex. Is it
uh,
because
the
like
X-Men.
everybody feels like they're the ones bringing change to the world, and that complex that causes you to think you're the harbinger of change? Or-
It was because the Messiah complex just came out for the X-Men, and I was trying to bury the lead with the party were actually going to end up being harbingers of this kind of apocalyptic scenario
Oh
that
shit.
happened.
Okay,
Yeah,
so I don't want to get too
by
many
doing
spoilers because
everything.
I eventually do want to play in this campaign. So that's
Oh no,
crazy.
we're gonna tear the whole thing down. This is the behind the curtains look at everything that I
Okay.
had planned for this world and the
Well, I want to
a
go.
cautionary tale for over planning.
Well, actually, I
Uh,
wanna I rather than tear it apart, I just wanna go
mhm,
into, like, the ideas and the things that inspired
sure,
your particular building, because the story itself, I think there's no reason to go into what, like, you had planned as far as story-wise, because like, we can go into the cautionary
sure.
tale, because I was actually just saying before, while you were gone, of the difference in design, philosophy that you had that
Mm,
I had, because you created this giant sandbox, and that you had things that were happening, and I was the opposite. I was like, "Oh, I want to tell this story, and
mhm,
okay, I need this beat, that beat, that beat, that beat, and then this would be an interesting places for these to happen," and built around the
totally.
story that I wanted to tell, which I got really lucky with my players wanting to
Well,
engage.
yeah, I think you can't.
There's no wrong way, but like,
No, no, no. I mean, I'm just saying you can't avoid that aspect of it at
oh
all.
yeah,
Even mine, I had this huge story that I wanted to tell, and there is major plot points. The only reason that I said we're may dig into the story is because there was a lot of there
story
were
influence
twists,
changes.
there
Okay,
were
yeah,
there were things that would change players perspective on what was happening. A lot of the, especially for the big story points, I wanted to have something that changed the world in some way. I wanted those big story points, like after you've done the mission where you go to a floating island. I wanted the everything to feel fundamentally different after that.
nice.
um that's what I mean by, like, we'll be turned
Okay,
into the story a little bit, just
okay.
because the the aspects of the world building, that I made specifically to create an engaging D&D story.
Now,
Um,
one thing that
mhm.
that I have been trying to do lately, which I realized I didn't do for a long time, was letting my players inform the.
I never
And
even got to that page. And I will say, for the record, for
oh,
everyone watching, Ty's a much better DM than I am. I got
thank you.
really enthusiastic on the world building aspect of it, and this game completely fell apart.
Well, that well, it fell apart. Just that was just a bad time in the lives. Everybody's had good groups that fell apart just cause, and I think
And that
that's
wasn't
that's
even.
kind of what happened there. I mean, that was what was the face? What did you say?
I said, and that wasn't even a particularly good group.
It
And
was
it wasn't really anyone's fault. We just had like 8 people, 7 or 8 people,
it was
way too many
doomed.
fucking
Yeah,
people. It was doomed from the start.
but I think yeah, like. I don't know. I always like in the back of my head, I secretly think when my campaign is done, I want to dive into yours or Molly's, because
Sure.
you
Yeah,
guys,
yeah. It's all yours,
like
man.
I just love that they so many ideas, and we'll kind of get into them. But what was I trying to
So,
say? Go ahead and dive into your races,
all right.
and then
Excuse me.
while you're doing the races, explain what led you into twisting them, changing them the way they are.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I really like the a lot of the base D&D races, and I like the stats. I didn't really want to mess with how they look or anything. But again, I'm that fresh coat of paint guy. I wanted people to sort of
The Fresh
make this
Prince of D and
world.
D.
Yeah, well, I just wanted this to feel unique for these players and sort of give them a chance to play a new,
Oh
new
yeah,
versions of these races. So, for instance, one of the biggest ones I changed was the dwarves. For the dwarves, because it's the Eberron campaign and there are pistols and flintlocks and stuff like that, I decided to take them in a very Western direction. Long, like dusters, cowboy hats, very like Old West.
it's funny.
Um,
Actually, the character I'm playing in Mike's campaign is ended up being very like, because I wanted to do a Western style forge priest, and I was like, oh, where am I going to start him out? And because of your dwarves, I was like, oh, dude, he's going to have dwarves. He's going to be adopted by dwarves, and they're going to be
oh,
the
he'd have
gunsmiths and
fit.
stuff. Oh, dude.
Totally.
I
He's the
also
perfect kind of character for this campaign. Yeah, absolutely.
so I gave him
Well,
sort of this sort of kind of voice.
nice. Yeah, and that was the thing is, normally, like, I wanted to kind of play with the player expectations and races and stuff. So, like, in this game, it was going to eventually be revealed that the dwarves are the bad guys.
Uh oh.
um
That would
the
have been
the
bad for
dwarves
everybody.
turn out to be like, and they're not really the bad guys because they're evil or anything. They're just expanding at an unsustainable rate and destroying the world as they go. There are some sinister things they did, which I'll talk about more when I get
You
to the
don't become a
Ganassi race.
superpower without a little behind
Yeah,
the scenes.
they're the up and coming super world power. They're the people who
Shaking
weren't
the
taken
status quo.
seriously forever, and now they've gotten technology. Like they were the technology race too. They were the ones who were figuring out and developing these massive things. Like their floating city isn't really magic. It's a combination of magic and engineering, and like it's the shakiest of the ones that are up because it's new and like they rushed it. They wanted to be seen as a floating island country.
Kind of
A
Chernobyl
power.
situation kicking off.
There are well, like shades of Russian sort of stuff like that, where there's a lot of very powerful people up top pressuring those down below to expand rapidly. That was their whole thing.
That's pretty cool.
Um, and to kind of play with that, like I wanted to have interesting interactions between the different races and nations. The humans are the X factor in this. I had them sort of situated in they're like centrally located between these warring factions, and they haven't decided. They've got some magic, they've got some technology, they've got, they're um
They're the
they're kind of
collectors.
like
They're
they're the
America in
tiebreaker
World War II.
almost. Kind of, but like they're the tiebreaker. They're the one that people are trying to win the favor of the whole time.
Okay.
So that creates. I just thought that created an interesting dynamic for these ultra powerful countries to still have to like try and win over this relatively smaller
Yeah.
country.
No
Humans don't even have a
hegemony.
floating island, by the way. They don't have a
Oh,
floating
they
island at
just have the
all.
biggest army.
No, they don't even have the biggest army. They have an army that is big enough to influence the outcome of the battle. That's
That's
it.
all you need.
And it's one of those, if they're allied with your enemy, you're probably not going to win, not because they're so amazing or anything, but because just numbers wise they tip the scales.
Yeah.
um and that was going to be something where the players could sort of like where I could adjust how the war would be going or where things would be happening based on what the players were enjoying.
Yeah.
So I wanted to make sure they had that mechanical effect of being able to sort of tip things one way or the other depending on just how things went, because a lot of like none of I tried to make sure that nobody was totally a good guy or totally a bad guy.
Makes
Even in
sense.
describing the dwarves, who I consider the bad guy, you can sort of understand that it's not the dwarves aren't evil, it's just that their way of doing things is fucked up.
Well, their
Like
mentality of we do this now while you strike while the iron's hot. No
they
reason to
have a
wait.
fixable problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have a fixable problem. It's not fundamentally they're not evil. There's no evil races in my all of mine because I just don't
I
think
don't
that's
like.
interesting personally.
Same here. Actually, I tried to.
um,
I try to not do any like definitively evil or good races. That's why like I included that whole orc vision quest thing.
totally, which was great. Oh, so yeah, so you have the dwarves. They're all set up. They're kind of encroaching. They've also created this thing where they usually have been up north, right?
Yeah.
But they've recently figured out things that can kind of harness technology. Um,
Like what?
yeah, they have this technology, sorry, that can harness the weather, right? So they've also fundamentally changed the weather so that they can be more, they can grow more, they can do more, they can
Yeah.
become that's the thing that like
And
kickstarted them into becoming a world power.
one shithead there is like, we can make it fucking snow on our enemies' crops.
No,
No.
it's the range is still limited to the
Oh,
dwarven
okay.
lands here, but that's causing havoc. You can't just change the fucking weather.
Yeah.
um, and yeah, so in one of the things that the dwarves are doing that's extra shady has to do with the Ganassi, and there was I was
Oh,
hoping,
I was gonna play a Ganassi for the
excuse me,
record. I was gonna be a Ganassi sword mage in his campaign who
yeah,
had no memories. And like,
in a previous campaign, Ty had played a Ganassi, so I thought, hey, I'll build up a whole Ganassi backstory thing that we can explore through his character, and I'll tie it in with the whole world thing. And what I had was the dwarves actually like were burning through Ganassi to power some of this stuff. Like they were actually like killing them and using their
their
bodies
elemental
to fuel
presence.
these engines, right?
God,
Um,
their
but what was happening,
elemental
the X
bodies.
factor they didn't expect was that slowly the Ganassi spirits or whatever would just go back into the earth, and they're slowly rising back up. And your character was going to be one of those who had just come back and he has no memory until the point where it was going to come wham. It was going to be like a big whammy moment
I've
where
been
you understand.
processed. Oh my god, that's
Well,
fucking great.
and that like the dwarves don't know about this yet either. It was going to be it was going to be like a fun sort of reveal of this world of how kind of dark things had gotten with the dwarves, and them
Uh,
sort of, it was going to be their heel turn moment.
that's a good heel
Um,
turn moment.
yeah,
And for the record,
because
if we do
like,
play it, I will totes keep it to myself. Um, like
yeah,
I can play a character with knowledge like they don't have any
oh,
knowledge because he was gonna start out kind of data-esque, and I was
yeah,
planning
absolutely.
on how to be shaped by the party, so that way I could. Looking back on it, it's really funny how that mechanically can work as like your party's conscience by like how bad is this guy getting? Because the one we had before when we were playing when Molly was the DM, like
Mhm.
people kept tricking me into doing things, and me as a player
I
knew
didn't.
the things. No, yeah, I know, but it started to get to the point where like people started feeling bad about things they were getting my character to do, and they're like, "This isn't fun anymore." Like I think it was gonna help get us out of our murder hobo phase eventually. Thinking back on
I
it, I
mean,
didn't
it was
design it
what
around it, but like it's just one of those things. Like eventually that might have helped curb
I will
murder
say. I
hobosm.
will say, man, as goofy and weird as murder hobos can be, they can still be a lot of fun.
Oh, no
And
argument.
there's no
No
right
wrong.
way to
No.
play D&D. I just want to say that because
Oh yeah.
I had a lot of fun in those campaigns. They sort of, yeah. I mean, yeah, because that's what the game is, murdering people. Like, that's the main mechanic.
Oh
So
man, I
like,
hate it when people bring it up. Like they're like, we have to murder today." It's like, dude, don't like, don't phrase it
sorry.
like that. No, 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 not like right now, but like even when you're
No,
actually
I do that a
playing the
lot.
game. Oh no,
Yeah.
like oh yeah. I think it was yeah, but like the whole like we're gonna go murder somebody. It's like no, you're gonna fight for justice and the right. Like you're fighting the good
Totally.
fight. You know, like when you're playing a heroes campaign, of course. If you're playing an evil campaign, oh man, throw in all of the murder references you want. Like I played an evil 40K campaign where I played like a chaos space marine sorcerer, and I just straight up betrayed people all the time. Like
Oh
I
man.
betrayed other players to their death, but we all knew the campaign we were playing, so it turned into like fucking laughs, like because
Nice.
it's one of those like,
Well, that's the thing.
we've got a
That's the
village, we're
real
gonna go
thing.
attack the city, and then like, oh yeah, and then I knew the village couldn't fucking win, so I was like, yeah, let's go, yeah, and then you have wings, you fly ahead, all right, you look seem like you're important, hey, you come over here, other player character, we're gonna let him do that and watch them all get massacred and just kind of stay. Like
Damn.
it was some cold blooded shit, like
Oh, I do want to say, on the world building,
yeah,
for this world too, the elves and the Eladrin were separate for 4E, and I
yeah,
made
they're
them
still
separate
separate.
for this, because uh, we had a player, Ed, who came up with this whole cool elf world that he had a character he was really into called Riftwind,
Shoot, me
and
too.
he had this whole backstory he wanted to do for Riftwind, and it was really kind of complex, and it had this whole village and stuff, and I was like, great, let's just fold that in.
I
And
did that too, and here the same tree
so
city
I
is into mine.
yeah, in this world, you have the Wood Elves, which were the Ironborn Elves, which were done by Ed, sort of had with that background. You had the High Elves, which were a whole nother thing that wasn't even revealed yet, and then you had the Eladrin, who like I wanted to take in a wildly different direction. Um, so with the
Yeah,
Ironborn Elves,
hobos.
no. With the Ironborn elves, it was this very Spartan thing where Ed set up to where they were very emotionless, very like locked down, and his character was sort of the odd one out. But they also guarded this forest entrance, right? And that forest was a link to the Fey world, and basically they guarded the gate to the Fey world or the Fey Wild. But the thing was, the Fey Wild keeps expanding, and they don't know why. There was a broken magic font somewhere, some whatever, thing to go fix.
Yep, some consequences of these floating fucking islands.
Yeah, and the elves, the Eladrin that live in the Feywild were like tribal. They were like living
Yeah,
on the edge. They were like war paint and fucking ripped up
yeah,
clothing, and just
fucking
they were the opposite of the
Magic the
Eladrin that you're used to
Gathering war
seeing.
paint elves,
Yeah,
Lana
and
war
then
elves.
yeah, Lana Worlds. And the reason that I went with that, with the Eladrin, is because I'd made a monk, and with Eladrin in 4E can are proficient with long blades, and you can take a feat to get advantage on all attacks with long blades. So it was
It's
I had a
ridiculous. It was
dual
so
wielding
broken.
monk. Yeah, oh yeah. At level 1, I had +1 to all attacks and advantage. And I was dual wielding swords, and I was like, "That's such a cool
And he
idea."
could burn ki for flurry of blows with any monk weapons that he was proficient with. So he was proficient with the swords and could blow fury, flurry of blows with his fucking swords. It was some
Yeah, it
solid
was
design
gross.
choices.
It was a min max that I didn't intend, but ended up being fun. But and just that, like, and that's another thing. If you're a DM out there and you have some cool builds of a character, you can expand that to be in your world building.
Oh
Like
yeah.
Ty, you have that monk or that druid, the mushroom druid, the
Oh yeah, the
fungus druid.
spore druid. Yeah.
Spore Druid is absolutely a faction you could have in your world.
Oh yeah.
You could take that one idea for that character and roll it into a Last of Us style,
Oh yeah.
world where there's this
Well,
this infection taking over, and like you can either have it be the direct conflict or just something in the world that people don't know what to do with yet.
and see, like that was actually what's really funny. Recently you guys had a Myconid encounter, and
Mhm,
like I wanted to kind of explore like what because I was really interested in the idea of the character of how he would interact with the world and his personality with this hive mentality behind it. And so I was like, I was kind of the Myconid that I created are not straight out of the book. The ones that you
mhm.
guys interacted with were how I thought a good version of that would go.
Totally.
and
Yeah.
and so that's why like they were all about um they had a bunch of warning signs to any hostile presence, like the death balloons, those spores, like, which terrifying. Oh my god, I'm so glad. Like, there's been so many times where you guys made the smart choices, like those crystal golems that you guys just bypassed last session. They all had 127 health points apiece, and there's three of them.
Jesus Christ.
They are serious guardians because like that is a semi-sacred place within the world, and like I didn't want it to, like, you had to basically be mind probed, and originally like nobody spoke primordial when I designed it, but so you guys kind
Ha.
of had a nice workaround with the Taz coming in. But like, yeah, originally it was supposed to be kind of more of a you gotta interpret and not make the and not fuck it up, and or else then you have
Yeah.
to basically run and give up that access point, because the thing is they couldn't
Right.
fly and most of you guys could fly, so I figured worst comes to worst, you fucking hoof it, and they are
Well, and
guardians so they stay there.
that's another example of your campaign informing your world building,
Yeah.
right? Where these guardians needed to be strong, need to be powerful. You can't just brute force your way through this. And if you're lucky, your party won't do that because say some of them stayed home to sleep or save their spells or something.
Well, and like that's the
Um,
the funny thing I've been finding out, the longer I DM is, don't underestimate your character's ability to fucking figure it out. Because, like, I have thrown so many things that were just gonna end real badly, but you guys have figured out when to fight, when not to fight, and oh yeah,
and give your players leeway
yeah.
too.
Don't
Like,
don't be
don't if
rigid.
just because they don't have the exact answer you're looking for doesn't mean you should fuck the whole party over.
And that's the
Like, know
thing.
when to have fun.
That actually comes into world building and encounter design. Because like when you're thinking of an encounter, and if there's
Just
only
something.
one way out, like your world building will inform your encounters. Like, like I know I have when you have a mine coming up and blah 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 blah, you know what kind of lives there. And then, based on what level they get there, of course, you'll change the difficulty of the encounter. But like, you gotta, for every situation, you have to think. I always go with the rule of three. You have to think of three ways yourself of how to get out of it, and then
Totally.
be accepting of any valid answer. Because the thing is, if you can't think of three, you can't expect to everybody who doesn't know what you know to think of one.
Exactly. Yeah. Sorry, could I get like a 5-minute break? I'm just gonna say hi to Molly real quick.
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead. I'll keep talking about my stuff. So no
Okay,
worries.
I'll be right back.
Perfect. You just want to flip your phone down so it's black screen. Perfect. All right. So, and so one of the interesting things about world building that I've found is, while it does, like I said, the world building affects your encounter design, but when you design the way that I do around plot points of major beats that you want to happen, um, it gives you a lot of freedom to build the world as you go. My whole campaign has kind of been a build as you go campaign, which has been informed by the thing that I want to do, and gives you a lot of freedom as far as deciding and shaking up things. Because oh, hi, Holochi. We were talking about world building and design in Dungeons and Dragons, and so I was talking about how your world building, like, there's I have my brother. He'll come back. He's saying hello to his wife. But we're doing. I'm basically talking about how my world design is based mainly around these big story beats that I want to happen, and so I designed the world around the story. While he's talking about his design choices are he built a world and kind of inflicts the story upon it, and is more sandbox oriented for the players. So mine's kind of more a little more guided than his, and so we're just talking about the positives and negatives of that. So I was kind of going into like how like when you have a design beat in mind, um, how much you can expand on that once you get into that particular place. Like I knew I wanted a desert in my world, like a big desert that some catastrophe had happened, and to show that to kind of give my world past and kind of make people think about the past of the world. So I just knew they were going to cross the desert, and then I got into the idea of races of how I wanted to turn. I didn't want definitively evil things in my campaign, so I decided to make a mini, kind of almost like a one-off within inside of the campaign of an orc vision quest. So that way, I could really break all of my players' expectations, so they could take everything as it came and accept the world that I was building, rather than thinking of it along the lines of classic fantasy. But design choice wise, to have that desert and then being able to go back in time to show it when it was a big forest, and what happened to it to make it become that way, is really important as far as world building, because you want your players occasionally if to ask about the past, and it just gives it that verisimilitude of feeling more real, because most of my verisimilitude up to that point. Oh, you've never played Dungeons and Dragons? It's fantastic, I gotta say. um the it's there's a reason why it's as notorious as it is when it comes to tabletop role playing games. Um, it's actually the fifth edition, the one that the most recent edition of it has been the kindest as far as entry level goes. Um, and if you want, every Thursday, I do I do DM a game on the channel every Tuesday, I should say. And then they're going through a campaign where the god of nightmares is encroaching onto the real world, and they got to figure out how and why and how to stop it. And so why we were talking about world building is how I and why I've made the decisions that I've made so far. Yeah. And then, oh, thank you for the follow, Holochi. um Look at that. That's a nice little note. Thank you very much. Um, but the fun thing about the D&D is, as a DM, the person who's in charge of everything, kind of like the storyteller who tells people what's going on, is it gives you freedom to build your own world and have your players kind of live in that world, as opposed to playing one of the set worlds. Now they do have books that are pre-written with adventures. Let me grab an example here. Uh, so like this, something you can go down. You can just buy a pre-built built world. This is Dungeon of the Mad Mage. It's water deep, a really cool campaign, but it's a pre-built city that has the world in it. We're talking about
Oh,
how to build
nice.
your own world,
Yeah.
and
Oh yeah, remember that everything in D&D is just, I mean, not everything, but the way I treated basically everything was you're just reskinning shit.
yeah, and that's
Half the time, if I couldn't find the creature I wanted or a creature that did what I wanted, so I would just grab whatever and reskin it, like, shamelessly.
yeah, it's exactly that. It's building stories for people to play. So you basically figure out the story you want to tell. You get some players, and then you release them into this world that you've built, and then let them figure out what they want to do, and then tell them how it informs the story. So like if you say that at a super small scale, you have like this dungeon where this you have this really bad evil person who's corrupting the local area. Now if they go in and they kill him, they stop the corruption. Yay, good. But if they decide to join him and super corrupt the area, you can take the story from that too. It's kind of you build this place and see what happens to it. Yeah, it's really, really fun. Cannot recommend it highly enough. And so I was talking about like how I designed around the story that I had in mind, where my brother he wanted to create a world that was new and interesting. He describes it as a new coat of paint on the world.
Yeah.
And so
Freshen that shit up.
exactly. So he was talking about how his dwarves are like Western inspired, and they're like this super rising power. How they've created all of this stuff, and they've been expanding into the world really quickly. And they're a little bit of bad guys for the shit they
Well,
had to do that. But um, go ahead.
yeah, and the fun part about involving like creating the politics of your world is that like just make it clear that there's any direct like the players can pick where things go and how they work. Like I think that's really important because and politics are an easy way to do that, right? Here are the sides at play. How do you want to get involved?
Yeah.
You know,
Who do you think is right? Because if you build an
and
abject world where there's no definitive right and wrong, it gives your players more of a chance to decide and shape the world rather than you're like, that's the good guy, that's the bad guy, go defeat the bad guy. It's
I
not as
mean,
engaging.
you can still do that. I mean, it is still engaging. It's all about
True.
what your players want and what they want to engage with and what you want to engage with as a DM. Because I wasn't interested in that, and I knew that if I did that, I would be phoning it in, and I wasn't. I just didn't want to put in the time. DMing takes so much fucking time. Make sure you're telling this a story that you're interested in. You know what I
Oh man,
mean?
I was so worried about doing that with my campaign because my campaign is there is a pretty much definitive bad guy now, but like the interesting thing is you guys like nobody's found out why he's doing what he's doing or exactly
No, not
what his
yet.
plan is, and I think that will be a really interesting thing when it happens.
Totally. Um, all right. I'm just gonna do a quick rundown of all the races
Perfect. Yeah,
and the things
let's
that
see
I
these new
changed up.
coats of paint.
So we had the dwarves. We talked about them already. The At the last second, I had to add in the drow because
Because I changed
Ty
characters.
changed from being a ganassi to being a drow. So what I did is I made the drow sort of a gypsy traveling
Did you say drow? I say drow.
drow. I say drow.
There's a W on the.
I don't care.
Continue. Sorry.
Uh, but like basically, because I didn't have a good like I already set up all of the politics in my world. I didn't have a good place to slot them in. So what I did is I made them sort of like a gypsy traveling race. So that way they can still interact with the world. They can still be a part of it, but they don't have to have these major powers set up. I didn't have to reconfigure the world at like such a late stage in developing the world. So always remember you're traveling folks, you're nomadic tribes. You can really, if somebody wants to play a screwball race that you just don't have any, you don't feel like you have any room for,
Changeling.
that's a great workaround, I think. I don't
Yeah.
know.
I really
Um,
actually that's pretty good. Actually, I ended up doing that with the Dragonborn a bit in mine
oh, yeah.
because I don't know what to do with Dragonborn. But
Oh,
I
it's tough. I'll tell you what I did here in a second. Okay, so you have your world, you have your floating islands, right? There's four floating islands. You have the newly made dwarven one, their rise to power. You
shaky but
have
stable.
shaky but stable. You have the Dragonborn, who actually don't have much of a presence on land anymore. They're a smaller nation, but they're kind of this fading huge power. At one point they were the biggest, baddest,
England.
ever. But like they're now their time is fading.
Yeah.
Um what's the third one?
Wasn't the there's one the masked or
There was the shrouded,
shrouded?
right?
Yes.
The shrouded are this race just full of like nobody knows who they are really. They had completely black skin and glowing eyes, and they were completely usually decked out in this crazy armor. They were very inspired by. I think literally the picture on the wiki is from Prince of Persia 3, The
Okay.
Sands of Time, where he had that shadow form.
Oh, yeah. I took my
Um,
armor straight from that in your first campaign.
well, and here was the thing, and this is why I was like, oh, we're gonna really get into it. The shrouded were actually going to be revealed to be the high elves. They were going to be elves that had just basically they collected all of this magic and they had this huge. It was going to be like a consortium of elves. It was the high elves, the wood elves,
Yeah.
and then like a representation from the Eladrin, but the Eladrin are still kind of wild. But they all share this floating island, and it was supposed to be like they are the magic side. You have the dwarves with the industrial side. Those were the two biggest powers in the world.
Nice.
With the Dragonborn, um, again, like having the Dragonborn had like a whole thing. Me and Michael talked a lot about the Dragonborn,
Yeah.
so they got a lot of weird stuff thrown in them. Um, the Dragonborn island was going to be like ridiculously well polished. It was like white marble everywhere, like almost like Apple Store field of stuff with glowing runes. Really clean, nobody does anything wrong, sort of 1984 kind of world. Um, which was going to be which I was hoping to be the second first or second island you guys went on, because it was going to really just throw things for a wrench, and the Warforged were going to be there, like the Warforged they had were going to be very stylized, very
um,
proper, and there was going to be a lot of them.
real
Like
quick.
the Dragonborn, you would slowly notice going through this island that there's maybe more Warforged than Dragonborn, and it was going to lead to this whole plot where you guys were going to find out that
Dragonborn
the
are dying off
the
or converting
dwarves,
themselves into. Sorry.
no, the elves and the dwarves, right? The elves have leverage on the Dragonborn because the Dragonborn population is not like fertile anymore. They're
Yeah.
not having kids. They don't know what's going on, but blah blah blah. And the magic of the elves was going to be one of the actually making sure that their race could continue. And
Yeah.
it was super hush hush. Nobody talk about
Yeah.
big sort of, you know, conspiracy theory thing that
Yeah.
you guys were going to get landed in. Um,
Oh, actually, real quick, we got a question. The game, what it's like.
oh, hi.
So the basic game, you
Hello,
have
Holo
books.
Chi.
You have books that have like a monster stats and things like that in them, which tell you, how strong or things like that. And then you use, it's a D20. It's a 20-sided dice, which basically informs the probability of whatever's going to happen. So you'll be telling the story and describing like what you've set up, and then your characters will figure out something that they want to do. Your players will. And so,
Yeah.
say like they want to convince, let's just use an easy one. Like they're at a store, they want to convince somebody of a discount. It's a persuasion check. So they take their d20, they roll it, they take whatever the corresponding number is, and then they'll add their proficiency modifier. You know how good they are at explaining somebody. Yes, yeah. When you start, you choose your race, your
Oh,
character
yeah, yeah.
class, and your name and everything, and that kind of informs the character that you're playing. If you're not the DM. And so that's why we're talking kind of about how the races as a DM when you set them up, how it informs your players kind of how to play and kind of a little bit of background on their person. That was a huge bite there, bud. There's a stuff in your face there, bud. No, and so yeah, you actually if you want to create a character, it's really simple and easy nowadays. There's a really awesome website. It's called D&D Beyond, and they have this awesome character creator where you can just go in, you can see all of these options, and they kind of help you out. Yeah, you laughing at the bite? I'm laughing at the bite.
Yeah. And yeah, the reason we're talking about world building right now is with D&D, they're going to give you a book that has a whole bunch of worlds already made in it, and a lot of suggestions for how these races are portrayed, how the worlds work. Some have complete builds of those worlds.
Dungeon
That'll
Master's
come with the
Guide.
Dungeon Master's Guide, and then you can get spin-off books like Eberron or
So,
Forgotten Realms that have pre-built worlds.
yeah, like
What we're talking about today is if you wanted to take all of these races and all of the stats for that, and then reskin them to tell your own unique story. With
yeah, so like say so all these races that we're talking about are in the player's handbook. Wow, I have so many books. As in the player's handbook. So there's your basic races, the ones that we've been going through. Like when he says Eladrin. Do, 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 do. So like there's elves, and there's different types of elves. This is what we're talking about, a drow, dark elf. They live in the underdark. In the standard setting, they live in an underdark, which is basically a huge underground system of caves and tunnels and everything. But in his story, they were wandering nomads because he wanted to change it. But they still have stats and descriptions and everything of how they look and what they get for bonuses. Don't you? Oh my God, he's doing it again. All right. Oh hey Molly. Oh. You're gonna clip him choking on this. Perfect. Oh man, but then like you also have different like halflings, which are little people, more like hobbit kind of race, and but so we're kind of going into I was going into like how our design choices, and he's going into what influenced him on his race choices. So
well,
Dragonborn are the ones he was talking about that are just
well, and,
kind of
and how
bleeding
your world building can
problems.
inform your story and vice versa. like if you have a certain kind of story, like I wanted my story to have a very like espionage sort of noir style to it almost, so like no one's a good guy, you know. But like not in a dark grim way, just in a sort of, I just wanted it to feel complex instead of, these are good guys, these are bad guys.
Dragonborn. They're
Dragonborn.
good people.
And yeah, like I said, check out dndbeyond.com. It has a bunch of races, all the explanations. It'll get you set up proper. And also, if you're ever interested in playing online with others, roll20.net is.
You can actually join. There are people who host, first timers and random people to join, so it's always a good resource. So Dragonborn had their floating. What was the last floating island then?
Real quick, if you're interested in what we're talking about right now, I while we were playing this game, this is years ago. This might be 10 years ago.
I
It
got the
might be
link.
10 years ago.
It's 10
But
years ago.
there was a site called Obsidian Portal where you could build your own wiki for your games. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I linked the
Ty's
wiki. And
linked those in the chat. You can check out sort of some of the stuff I'm talking about. It's not all there because, um, excuse me,
some of it was
as I was building
surprises.
it, the whole game fell apart. And there's also stuff that is hidden behind the DM screen part of the website that doesn't show on the live link.
Really,
Um,
that's awesome.
oh yeah,
I didn't
because
know
like
they had. I didn't.
I had plans for all of this stuff. Um, yeah, you have the dwarves of the north being this sort of industrial race. You have the
Shrouded.
shrouded, which is sort of this like secret magical elf base. You have the
Cabal.
dragonborn. And yeah, sometimes you just had, there were so many things to include. Yeah, the Eladrin of the Rift, which were the really tribal, really like primal Eladrin race. Um, yeah, with tieflings too. Like I didn't know what to like again. Somebody threw tiefling that they wanted to play, and I hadn't really considered that in my big world building. And I just done the traveling drow, having them be sort of this gypsy race. So my big solution to the tiefling was to sort of have this tiefling underground. It was a
The
crime
tieflings.
syndicate of tiefling, and they were sort of refugees from like another continent, right? Like I didn't know what to world build them out. I didn't want to do anything too lame or too
Involved.
weird. So yeah, so I kind of made him like a big crime family, and that was just this contingent. Not everyone's a part of it. It was just the major influence
Yeah,
that they had in the area.
the way
So
that
players
other
could be
people in the
part of
world
it.
would perceive them.
Yeah, players could be part of it if they wanted. If they didn't want to be part of it, that was totally cool too. But that was again how I kind of slid them in after I built so many things. I also wanted to put a ticking clock on the world because it's always interesting. I just wanted to make sure that we didn't get too far off in the weeds.
Yeah.
So there was also an invasion happening.
So, as a player, basically, you'll get it's like you're reading a book where there's going to be like a call to action, like something happened and you can affect the outcome of it. So, like, say you're playing this, like, basically, you're um, your character's finding rest in a village for the night, but then somebody attacks the village. So you as a character can decide, whether you want to help the village and or just move on as fast as you can and escape out in the middle of the night. And so the story is entirely up to the players on what they want to do or how their character would react. And so you don't have to it's not just a exploring kind of thing. It's definitely like it's choices. You're basically you'll be given choices or things will happen and you decide what to do about them, as described by your DM.
And part of the most fun part of D&D is that nobody really has control over what's going to happen, not even the DM. The
Yep.
DM puts up situations, and then the dice rolls will kind of determine how they go a lot of the times. There is strategy that players use. There's ways that you can mitigate a lot of this stuff, but every once in a while, just the dice will have a part in the story. And that's sort of
So
what
true.
keeps people coming back to D&D is that, best of intentions and still something can go.
Like,
It's
so
the X factor. Yeah.
this little thing, like, you have to roll to find out how your actions go, like 20 being the highest, which is almost guaranteed success, and 1 being the lowest, which is a guaranteed failure. But like, even living or dying, when you run out of hit points, you have to roll this, and you have 3 successes or 3 failures. 3 failures is 10 and under, die. 3 successes, which is 10 or higher, and you get to stabilize and you don't die. Yes, yeah. So like say you just want to hit something with like a weapon. You would roll your dice. So you say you roll it, and out of 20, you get a 16. You take that 16, and then you add however good you are with that weapon. It's called your proficiency bonus, and then like you basically have strength or dexter modes, but without getting too involved. Basically, this determines if you hit or not. And so it's the random factor of, and then once you hit it, you determine how much damage you do based on another dice. So let's say you have a d6. So then you roll this, and that's how much damage you do to that creature. So like 6. So, and then that creature, just like a video game, has a health point pool that you reduce, and then you either become victorious or it kills you first because you have an HP health pool that also ticks down as it attacks you back.
Yeah, and you can heal, and there's all sorts of. It's.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
the thing is, a lot of basically every fantasy game out there now has been influenced by D&D.
Yes, yeah.
You can see a lot of tropes.
If you've played like any turn-based combat game, it's like that. Only everybody's controlling different characters. But then it also expands into the social interactions. Like if you're trying to scare somebody, like intimidate them, you roll to see how well you intimidated them, and uh, and how good you're at intimidating. Like if you're playing like a little halfling, you might not be very good at
Mm.
it. But you're playing like a huge half orc. You just
Well, and I do want to say people always just cheat without the
Oh
dice.
yeah, no. People
Well,
you roll in front of everybody else, or like online there's digital rollers that show the roll so you can't lie. Like you can't just be
people do
like
lie. It
it's a
happens.
20. It does happen, yeah, but
You just the thing is you just really you mitigate that as much as you can, and then what you do as a DM, since you're the person running the game, if somebody's cheating, like they're constantly getting 20s or their luck is just too good, just you talk to them individually. A lot of what being a DM is conflict resolution too. Like, yeah, you have to tell a story, yeah, you have to do all this, but you also have to keep four or more adults being able to meet on a regular basis and have fun.
and
And if
focused
somebody's
on what they're
cheating,
doing.
that just sort of, yeah, and cheating sort of just talk to the player.
Yeah. You
It's clear
basically
that you're cheating. Like, I'm sorry, but like, can we just,
and it's so much more fun when you're not cheating. So there's actually
yeah, have that
advantages
X
for
factor.
them not to cheat because there's no reward for cheating, really. Like you just, oh, what you wanted to happen happened. There's no fun. There's no mystery. There's no challenge to it. So it's like turning on God mode in a video game where you're just like, okay, I guess that happened. This is boring. So
Yeah,
yeah. Anyway, let's see.
yeah.
So
Um,
what was the next race you kind of exactly? Yep.
uh,
You play God. You herd the cats and try to make it fun for everybody, and that's your job as a DM.
Oh, and yeah. But remember, you're also a god of a place with free will.
That's the
So your
thing.
players are gonna do stuff and want, and like
Crazy
that's the appeal
stuff.
of the game. You definitely don't want to limit your players from doing too much either, because the minute you do that, they might as well just go play a video game. The whole appeal of D&D for somebody like me, I really like the social interactions in D&D. I like being able to solve problems without having to just, you know, beat
Hit it
up
with
somebody. So it's important to always make sure that you're giving players options on how. Yeah.
so funny. Apparently, the death balloons that happened. Mike was like, "I just rethought my entire play philosophy when you told me what could have happened."
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like we had a player, he's like a newer player, and his whole thing was to attack everything that came up. And basically we ran into an encounter where if he had attacked like he was planning to, it would have been a total party wipe. We'd have all died.
Not everybody,
Absolutely.
but very likely.
I mean, I'd have got away, but
Somebody would have died. Yeah. But luckily,
oh, and player death is a thing that happens in D&D too. There
yeah.
are ways to
No,
resurrect
no, not player
characters. It's very
character death.
difficult.
Player death should not be.
Yeah,
Don't
yeah,
kill
player
your
character
players.
death. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, but yeah,
But
there's. Go ahead.
it's another thing that's kind of unique to D&D that I like.
Oh wow, you stayed up 5. Wow, go. Yeah, dude, get some good sleep, or if you're just starting your day, have a good rest of your day. Thanks for kind of checking us out, hanging out with us. Like I said, we do this so you can check the videos, check out our game if you're interested to see how we
Yeah,
play it, and yeah. But thank you very
we
much for
play.
the follow.
Yeah, we play every Tuesday. It's the Dawn Forged company. You can kind of see the game in action if ever you're interested.
Yeah, I DM.
Thanks for
He's a
stopping by.
sorcerer, and so with the next race, what was the one that really Like, what's one of your proudest twists other than the dwarves? Oh, hey, thank you for the bits. That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Hey, bits. Woo!
Bits,
Love
the
bits.
bits. No.
um. Oh man, I mean, the dwarves were the one I had the most fun with, and also I do want to make a shout out. I looked through a lot of art and stuff on the internet first, and I came across a picture of a dwarf in a duster with a hat and a rifle, and I was like, "That's too good. That's too good." Like I said, I wanted to put a ticking clock on the world so that people had like a, a reason to stick with the main storyline, and that was this invasion from the with the orcs across the sea. And the orcs across the sea, I just again I found this character art that I really liked of like a samurai orc, and I was like, that should just do that, like a samurai orc army that's you know. It
Oh
did, and
yeah.
again, it was one of those things where it's a rumor when it first starts. Like I was gonna have that invasion begin during the game after the world felt like it was established to shake it up. Like the way that the reason I designed the world the way that I did is so that it could always be evolving, so that at any point I could change the dynamics for the players.
Yeah.
It so the world didn't feel static. It felt breathing and living. Again, that's another bonus of establishing the sort of the politics and bigger parts of your world building. You can also get screwed by it though, because again, I did all this work and we played this game 3 or 4 sessions,
Oh.
but we had too many players and it just wasn't gonna work. I had big plans. I wanted to do everything that I liked. One of the few games we got to play. There was also like Cthulhic gods or whatever. I just liked the idea of the gods being much more casual. So an encounter where the party got turned into different creatures from the monster manual, and they had to fight each other in a Pokemon style arena. Where I set up a map where they could go to places where they were stronger,
Oh man, that was one
like
of
a
the
pool and stuff.
as far as design choices go, that was actually like one of the like weird thing, like one critique I actually had for yours is you did it too early where like we were all excited to play these
It
characters
was we
and
needed a filler game. We
oh,
needed a
that's what
filler
it
game
was?
because like
Oh,
3
okay.
people couldn't make it.
That makes sense.
So
Okay.
I had to think of something.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I didn't wanna do it. Ugh. The very first the also, be aware of scale. This was something I made a
Yeah.
big mistake of as a DM because I had all of these ideas. The very first mission was like a train, like stopping a train. Um,
A train
you know,
job? That sounds awesome.
a train drop. It was I mean, it went pretty well because, I didn't the main thing to win wasn't for the characters to do something that their power sets were in. There was a big fucking like trebuchet on the or not there was a big crossbow on the top of the train, and you guys were being attacked by like a griffin, I think.
Oh
So we
damn.
just needed a player to get there and go chunk and make the shot.
Oh yes.
But like I also put it I'm a big fan of ticking clocks. I don't know, I just think they add a lot of tension.
That's
So
one thing. That's one of my weaknesses. Is my ticking clocks aren't the best.
they're not necessary at
They
all.
no, I
I
but
just
they but like that's one thing. Actually, my I'd say my biggest weakness as a DM is not amazing tension building. Like I don't I you know I'm good at moments, but like the tension building up to the moments don't really hit. Like with the whole tree of
it
death thing and
depends.
stuff. Like I feel like it's
The
something I
orc
need to work on.
I don't know, the orc thing worked really orc side quest. Going through the desert felt really big,
Yeah.
you know. Yeah, there's been a lot of stuff that felt really big.
No, no, but
I
like it
think
wasn't.
you're not giving yourself enough credit.
No, but there's no ticking clock, no tension. Like I'm not. That is
The
the thing I'm
tension is
talking about.
still there. I think it's still there, and I think ticking clocks can artificially make a game feel tense when it's not too. So
True.
I don't think they're completely necessary. It was just something I was really into at the time.
It's a
So what I
really good
did
design
is
element.
I had a marker that I would move forward. It was like, okay, here's the train, here's the end of the tracks, and then each round I would move it closer to the end.
Nice.
Make sure that by the time the players got to the end of the tracks, that would be like the lose condition. But I also was generous enough with the turns that it was very unlikely to happen. So
Smart.
sort of like a mixed bag. Let's see. I think I covered most of the races. Oh yeah, I had changed things in the world, but they were a myth. They were like
They
something
were
you heard about.
Were they real or not, or they were just
They
we would
were
find
real.
out
Oh,
eventually? Okay.
absolutely. But they were like 100% hidden. Like they
So,
just were.
they
They
just
were.
were.
Yeah, they were almost more like a creature type to the world, the way the world that this world would think of them, even though they were fully functioning people. And there
So
was even going to be one in the party because
yeah.
for to, I really wanted to create a base for the characters so that I wouldn't have to rely on towns too much if I didn't want to. um,
Super smart.
which is which well because the world had these floating islands and all of these elements, there was also airships. And I mean, being a guy who's remotely enjoyed Final Fantasy at any time, I thought it would be really cool if the party got an airship eventually.
Yeah.
And I created this character, Lux, who is an artificer, to help through the early stages with healing if needed. Um, but he was kind of like a out for his own kind of guy. And eventually, though, he was going to be the pilot of the airship as well. And like the airship was going to be one of those things where it would be available sometimes when you needed to move places, but oftentimes Lux would also go off and do trading, and so there'd be chunks of time where it wasn't available, and that would also give me an excuse to make Lux the storefront.
Yeah.
So if he's going on these trading missions and stuff, not only does it help limit the amount of time you have an airship because that could totally break the fucking game, um,
The game
or
breaks
just
itself eventually with all of the portals.
yeah, I mean, yeah, but it helped keep the players. It helped me from as a DM from not having to deal, hopefully, with people going somewhere they're not supposed to go or having to come up with some complete blue sky out of nowhere things.
Ugh,
Um,
I worry about that
while
every
also,
session.
yeah, while also providing a storefront. Like it just seemed easier to me to have a consistent sort of
Well, okay, so
again
one
because video games, but
one of the things that in my world building where like I try to build around the story beat conflict that I want to happen. Like in the most recent, I knew I wanted the dwarvish city to be oppressive and the king to be the problem, and I wanted to fucking animal man. No, but I had this idea where I wanted the conflict to be with the government and the king, and I wanted to give that to be the source of conflict. For God's sakes, Joe! Love Molly Can has. But like so like I designed mine around the conflicts I wanted to happen, like so like the first town, I just wanted to be kind of like a the town itself was just a place where you could interact with, and the main conflict would be in the mines, and then that conflict would be more of a man versus elements sort of story. And then I wanted Maestros to be man versus man, where it was like the governments. And then with the desert in between, I wanted it to be I would actually wanted to use that as building a past for the world to increase the verisimilitude.
yeah,
Vernder,
that worked really well for that, by the way, too. Like
and oh,
having
so
like
excited.
ancient remains and temples and things, always a bonus, always a good way to establish some sort
But
of
not only that, throwing you
longer
guys
world.
back in time to show the desert before it was a desert. It was like because it was,
Mhm.
I thought that's the main aspects of it were, yeah, just create that to make him to create an interest and know that the world could be more.
Mhm.
And then Vernder was gonna be the it was gonna be kind of more like man versus. Well, I wanted it to be kind of more man versus God, but then I decided it was too early for that. So it was
Yeah,
an it
definitely.
was it was a man versus man, but to show the corruption leaking into the world, and so it was like the beginning of to show like how the power is growing and how it's actually starting to affect governments and things like that. And then the forest interlude was more world building in this ancient forest that had like all that stuff, and then to incorporate some of and then of course Bloodscale's backstory, which was incorporated. It's the best way I could figure out how to incorporate
Oh yeah, if you can figure out a way to include your players' backstories or your players in your world building, always try and do that.
and like so his I
That
was
was
the
another
only way I
thing.
could think of to do a fucking brain damaged, can't remember anything backstory. Oh,
I mean, yeah. Well, and that was another like I talked to the players beforehand, and I knew what vaguely they were gonna play,
all eight of them.
so that I could make sure that this there would be natural ways for them to interact with the story just based off of the bigger picture in the world. Oh, the Harbinger thing, by the way. Oh, I also had you've kind of done this similar thing. You have the Dawnforge company. You have Lady Dawnforged. I know it's
Alaria
terrible.
Dawnforge, yeah.
Ilaria Dawnforged's four pupils to go find.
Yeah.
Right. I in this one was gonna have these Warforged who were gonna be these ancient machines who were like max level. They were kind of like the army
The
in your
keepers.
pocket. No, they were going
Oh.
to be the ones who could sort of point at a thing and they would just going to be a druid.
Oh,
I don't remember all of them.
one of the
The
story
main one was going to
beats.
be a druid who was a little bit weaker than the others, and there was going to be a paladin who like refused to fight, but like if he fucking busted out his warhammer, it was going to be just destruction. Um,
It's
which
funny,
was going to rely on a lot of talking, a lot of getting him into the conflict.
I actually had before our monk quit the game, I had monk masters. I was gonna put in each
Yeah,
city that where he could learn different things from them.
that's
Um,
fun.
and but the thing is, they're still in the city, but no one had any reason to seek them out or find anything about them. It's funny because you guys finally stumbled across some of the monk lore with the crystals in.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, that was always gonna be there. Like it was gonna be, but
Uh,
the master was gonna be missing because of all of the mix up and
I
mash
like
around.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
in Kern. Yeah, and then so, and that's another thing. Like in your world
Excuse me.
building, like let your if your players have something cool in their backstory they want incorporated. Like my hells and thing and demons and stuff are very informed by my tiefling. You know, because she kind of created the. It's kind of it is a more typical hell landscape, but it still maintains kind of like the hierarchy and things like that. So I had to figure out a reason certain things might have happened behind the scenes to make her parents not bad. Like her dad's a devil, but he's not like he's a bad guy, but he's not a bad guy. You know, like
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
you know,
yeah.
and what could have happened to change things like that, and we'll get in more of that, of course, when it happens. I've been dropping. They finally got the book, which will be engagement as far as her storyline, or done overthrowing the government, and that's the
You
thing. Like,
know.
think about things that you want to do, like things that you would want to play, and like I
Oh
thought
yeah.
overthrowing a government right now would be just super fun to do. Like,
Yeah, I get that. Fucking yeah. Well, oh man, and okay. So you want to know the one of the you want to know the harbinger complex? You want to know what was
yeah,
going to happen to really make that click?
no,
So after you guys gone through tons of, and here's the thing, I left a lot of slack in the story
you
because I
have
knew that
to.
there would be a lot of stuff. I did want to try and do like there was a 3.5 book that Michael gave me called Dragon Mech.
I have
Um,
it.
yeah, I was gonna have you guys do a gladiatorial sort of Dragon Mech fight at some point.
I've been.
Um,
I could not figure out. I wanted to incorporate it. I could not figure out a
it's
place
really
for it.
difficult to figure out
It's
how,
not only
where, and
that.
how.
That is not a balanced book at all.
Oh, and well, it wasn't gonna be a major part of anything, but it was gonna be like these ancient machines that were abandoned, and that
Oh,
you
the
guys were gonna have
Warforged
to
to.
use. Yeah, you guys were gonna have to use one for like a fight against it. It was basically a big old kaiju Power Rangers battle.
See,
Just
this is why
because
you need to
that's what
DM a
I like,
motherfucking
that's what I
game.
want. Well, I couldn't figure out how to get the whole party involved in a fun way. So that's, I mean, I never even got to the chance to really get to that. Um, but the reason it was called the Harbinger Complex is because it was the final battle was going to take place in the dwarven floating city. And when you guys took down the bad guy, like the big bad, the island was going to crash. Uh, but the island is also the center for their weather control. So it was going to sweep through this cold snap through the dwarves, and you guys were the harbingers of that kind of apocalyptic.
Harbingers of the nuclear winter.
Yeah, and you guys were going to have to figure, like, you guys were going to be branded as like the most wanted people on the planet for a while.
Yeah,
Um,
that sounds awesome. And like, see, that's
which
a
was gonna lead into a thing with the Feywild, where you guys, well, the Feywild's still been expanding this whole time, right? See,
yeah.
there were like phases, like upping the ante of like the
Well,
political,
it's funny because
the world shattering, and then I had the orcs too. Like having the
yeah,
three different threats mean that you could have dealt with them in any order, but I didn't think that I could avoid the Feywild fairly easily, hopefully.
It's funny.
But I wanted to
My
save that arc for later
yeah,
because in the Feywild one, when you guys entered, I was gonna hand you all new character sheets
I remember
where
this. Yeah.
like your race and class had changed, but your character was the same. It's just an effect of being in the Feywild. And I was gonna give you guys the options when you left whether or not you wanted to keep your new form, revert back to your old one,
Now, would
especially
we?
given the information that your old form is one of the most wanted people on the planet, which
Yeah,
I thought would be a fun,
that is pretty neat.
difficult choice for a player character.
Now, okay,
Because
you know what's funny?
yeah,
How unbelievably simple my campaign is, which goes
uh,
to show like whether how much work and stuff and complexity you want to put into these things. There's no like right or wrong way to do it because mine
no,
is
absolutely not. I think
that's the
mine is
best thing
actually
about
a
the
pretty bad way to do things, for the record.
um
I think there's a lot of potential in there, but like planning this far ahead is only going to result in you being frustrated and not getting to do these things.
and that's the thing is the biggest thing about world building is patience. Your characters, don't forget how small your characters are, your player characters are in the world, especially when they start out. It's going to take them a
Hmm.
long time to even like I got lucky in the fact that like my threat was introduced real early, like
Yeah.
level 2. And like the but a lot of people design their games around a lot more open world and then have a conflict or calamity happen like the mech fight that suddenly that's when the real meats and potatoes of the campaign starts. This is my first game, so I was like, we're just gonna start out in it, and then I'm gonna, the threat grows.
Well, and you had also the advantage of seeing people like myself who went way too hard on the world, but
Not gonna lie,
paid
it was one
off.
of the reasons I was like, I'm not gonna plan too much because I'd never
Well,
played a
I
game that
everyone
was this long before, like,
same.
and I'm actually super proud of the game and the fact that it's even got to this point. Really,
Definitely
really happy that
could
Molly,
still go bi-weekly.
dude, you know how long that would take to get to the end of the story,
You know how
like.
long it is to go every week? Anyway.
Dude, actually, we play like because we only play for 3 hours most of the time, like really closer to 2.5, depending on when we started. There's a lot of like the standard playtime is between like six
Oh,
and
I
eight
know it.
hours. So
I can't do that anymore. Like I've done a few in-person games up in what since I moved up here,
yeah,
and they're fun, but I just by the end of them I'm falling asleep and I just want to go. And everyone's having like a good old time, I guess, but
and
like
homebody.
it's been 8 fucking hours. Like this is not my job. I'm not getting paid. I'm not getting over. Like we're hitting the overtime button, and
That's
like
fair.
I'd like to leave now.
So we'll go ahead and wrap up. It's gonna be like eight
Oh, are
thirty,
we
and I gotta go
wrapping
to
up?
bed. Yeah. So
Oh, do you want to play some Overwatch real quick, or
let's go and wrap the episode, and then we'll talk about that.
yeah, we'll wrap the episode.
As far as so these are the kind of two different design styles, like we've been saying. Mine are beat
They
based.
each inform each other though
Yeah,
too. They're not
exactly.
they're not real. They're not diametrically opposed anyway. That's not an either
Yeah,
or.
they are by
Yeah.
no means, and neither one is the correct way to do things. It's just so basically, what I would recommend if you're planning on DMing is decide what's the most important thing to you, like, and whether you want player like and then decide what's important to you and decide want how much freedom of that choice you want to give to your players, because like
Make sure make sure
don't
make
be
sure
afraid to
your
kill your baby.
interests well, make sure your interests line up with your players'
Oh yeah.
interests.
Oh
Right? If
god,
you're playing
we forgot
murder hobos,
the biggest
like
thing.
do murder
Talk to your
hobos.
players and see what
Talk to
kind
your
of campaign
players.
they want to play, because that's the thing.
Yes.
One of my players quit because he wanted a really combat heavy experience, and that's just not how my game was evolving, and I don't blame him at all, because if you came to my game for combat, you would have been bored the last 8 sessions. Like
To fight some
RPG
shit.
heavy. Yeah, you guys are planners. God,
Oh my god.
the
I
consequences.
can't believe this latest one has taken so long. I'm like,
It's
I don't know what to
astonishing.
do though, but like
That's the thing, is like, but next session there's no more planning. There's nothing else. It's going down.
Yeah, that's one good use of the ticking clock by going like, here's when the fight is happening.
Well, I
You
gave you
have
guys a
X number
ticking
of
clock, and
days.
you guys ignored it. So bad things now.
Didn't ignore it.
The king's building shit, and you guys are like, okay. I
But
guess
we
I
had to
wasn't
wait
too
for the
clear.
fight. The fight is our platform to kick off anything. We can't do anything like it feels like the resources we have right now are minuscule, so we have to like have a leveraging event where we can get more people
That's
inside.
fair. And that's
So
another
it's
thing.
like, yeah, he's building things and yeah, that sucks, but like if we went and did anything about it now, I feel like we would just get rocked and ruined.
That's fair. Yeah, and like that's yeah, it's another design thing. Is like that's where I said I'm not good at the click ticking. I'm getting better at the ticking clocks, but still not amazing. All right. So with that, any last thoughts on world building and last bits of advice?
I mean, my main thing is make a world that you're enjoying, make a world that you like, that you're telling a story you want to tell because you're gonna be with it for a long time. If you want to tell a complex story, be extra in love with your world and really make all those little tweaks that you want to tweak. There's something about one of the races or one of the cities or something that you just really don't like and don't want in your campaign. Cut it out. If there's something you really want to include, figure out how to include it. It's much more rewarding to do that than to just do whatever is handed to you. And again, it takes so much time to DM. Make sure you're having fun. That'd be my biggest thing.
My biggest
Yeah.
thing is oh, go ahead. Sorry,
No, no, that's it.
I thought you were okay. So my biggest thing is um, don't be afraid. Like whatever you've built, don't be afraid to just do whatever you're feeling like at the time as well. Like as long as it fits in the context of your world.
Yeah.
I had like my original Orc Vision Quest thing was just something I wanted to do, and it was one
Mhm.
of the best decisions I ever made in my game. And don't forget,
Sure.
these are all stats. These are all balanced to whatever they are. You can make them whatever you want. And
Oh yeah.
you can also change anything about them. If you want a kraken
Uh,
that fucking speaks to people instead of just a big beastie, you can.
Depending on your crew. I know there are some D&D
True.
purists out there, people who like know the books and they need that knowledge. Like that knowledge plays into their character. Just make sure you know your players when you make these changes.
Well, and
And you're
if
99% of the time you'll be fine. You'll be totally safe.
well, if you have a character who's super informed like that, if it's something their character will know, let them know. Otherwise, make
Yeah.
them roll for the knowledge. You know what?
Always make them roll. Make them roll.
Don't
Fucking
metagame. Your
check that
character doesn't know. All right. So, anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Thank you. Shout out
Woo.
to Holo Chi for the follow. We appreciate you.
Thanks,
And
Olochi. Thanks for stopping by.
every Thursday, more tabletop, and every
Some Molly.
Tuesday, tabletop Thursdays, and then every Tuesday we're gonna be rolling the game. So we'll catch you hopefully
Oh,
one of those.
by streamer law, we have to mention
It's
Molly can.
September. No, sorry. What?
It's September, half off subs, all September. Also, Molly Can has who stopped by. She also has a stream
Oh,
where she does sort of
she's
horror
awesome.
games every once in a while. Really funny stuff. Go check her out too.
She is
I'm
badass.
biased because I'm married to her, but you
Uh,
should also check it out.
I'm not biased. She's funny as hell to watch.
If you're a streamer and you stop by the stream, just let us know. We'll check out your
Yeah,
stuff, man.
we love shout outs. Yeah. So we'll
Bye bye.